Heterophobia and cisphobia do not exist, and here's why. A phobia is an intense and irrational fear or hatred of something, and the key word there is irrational. When we're talking about LGBT people, the LGBT community, there's this kind of social understanding across just everywhere that LGBT people are seen as inferior. They're seen as something to fear and hate. But there's no real reason why. There's no justification behind it. It's just irrational. And so that's where homophobia and transphobia come into play. It's irrational. And society collectively uses that irrationality. They use that fear and that hate. And then they turn it into violence, and they turn it into harassment, they turn it into discrimination, and that causes us as LGBT people to become much more fearful of our situation and the people that can make it much worse, which is the people who have power over us, which is cis and straight people. And so the idea here is that in the case of the LGBT community, fearing the non-LGBT community is justified. And hating them is justified, even though personally I don't hate them, and for the most part I don't really fear them either. It's justified to be afraid of cis and straight people, and so it's not a phobia, and so you can't really label it a phobia, and so these words don't really apply. They aren't real concepts, because in the world that we live in, LGBT people have it bad enough where it is justifiable as a phobia. So that's why these words are so kind of offensive to LGBT people, is because it's a persecution complex of cis straight people saying, oh, well, just because you have it bad, I have it bad too, because you hate me, you're afraid of me. Well, yeah, but we have a reason to, because you're awful to us, and that's why. So another thing I wanted to tackle very quickly is this concept of I'm not homophobic despite blank. Like, for example, somebody says, I'm not homophobic just because I made this really offensive joke against gay people, or I'm not transphobic just because I think that trans girls are dudes or whatever. That's still homophobia and transphobia, and the reason why is because you're tapping into the collective idea that LGBT people are seen as inferior. And so you're tapping into the socially accepted homophobia and transphobia that exists everywhere around you. And so you're contributing to that problem, and so you're pulling from that problem into your own personality and harnessing it. And so you really are being homophobic and transphobic. I mean, honestly, even within the LGBT community, there will be homophobia and transphobia within just about everybody. I admit that I probably have homophobia and transphobia within me, and I can't really confirm it based off of any experiences, but it's just kind of there because society puts it on all of us. Society doesn't just put it on the cis and the straight people. They tell cis straight people to hate us, and then they tell us to hate ourselves, and so we hate ourselves and we hate each other, and that's still irrational. But it's rational to be afraid of cis and straight people, and so you can't tap into that social understanding of LGBT people as inferior without becoming homophobic or transphobic. And so we need to work out of that, and one of the first steps is to abandon the phrase heterophobia or cisphobia, because they aren't real concepts.